his own liking for him. This is all I can say at present, with the exception of one other thing I heard which I blush to mention. But your word is law, and you have ordered me to have no concealments from you. Their talk turned once, dear madam, on yourself. I think I heard the word creature from Miss Milroy, and I am certain that Mr. Armadale, while acknowledging that he had once admired you, added that circumstances had since satisfied him of his folly. I quote his own expression. It made me quite tremble with indignation. If I may be permitted to say so, the man who admires Miss Gwilt lives in paradise. Respect, if nothing else, ought to have closed Mr. Armadale's lips. He is my employer, I know. But after his calling it an act of folly to admire you, though I am his deputy steward, I utterly despise him. Trusting that I may have been so happy as to give you satisfaction thus far, and earnestly desirous to deserve the honour of your continued confidence in me, I remain, dear madam, your grateful and devoted servant, Felix Bashwood. 2. From Mrs. Oldershaw to Miss Gwilt. Diana Street, Monday, July the 21st. My dear Lydia, I trouble you with a few lines. They are written under a sense of the duty which I owe to myself in our present position toward each other. I am not at all satisfied with the tone of your last 2 letters, and I am still less pleased at your leaving me this morning without any letter at all, and this when we had arranged, in the doubtful state of our prospects, that I was to hear from you every day. I can only interpret your conduct in one way. I can only infer that matters at Thorpe Ambrose, having been all mismanaged, are all going wrong. It is not my present object to reproach you, for why should I waste time, language, and paper? I merely wish to recall to your memory certain considerations which you appear to be disposed to overlook. Shall I put them in the plainest English? Yes, for with all my faults I am frankness personified. In the first place, then, I have an interest in your becoming Mrs. Armadale of Thorpe Ambrose as well as you. Secondly, I have provided you, to say nothing of good advice, with all the money needed to accomplish our object. Thirdly, I hold your notes of hand at short dates for every farthing so advanced. Fourthly and lastly, though I am indulgent to a fault in the capacity of a friend, in the capacity of a woman of business, my dear, I am not to be trifled with. That is all, Lydia, at least for the present. Pray don't suppose I write in anger. I am only sorry and disheartened. My state of mind resembles David's. If I had the wings of a dove, I would flee away and be at rest. Affectionately yours, Maria Oldershaw. 3. From Mr. Bashwood to Miss Gwilt. Thorpe Ambrose, July the 21st. Dear Madam, you will probably receive these lines a few hours after my yesterday's communication reaches you. I posted my first letter last night, and I shall post this before noon today. My present object in writing is to give you some more news from this house. I have the inexpressible happiness of announcing that Mr. Armadale's disgraceful intrusion on your privacy is at an end. The watch set on your actions is to be withdrawn this day. I write, dear madam, with the tears in my eyes, tears of joy caused by feelings which I ventured to express in my previous letter. See first paragraph toward the end. Pardon me this personal reference. I can speak to you, I don't know why, so much more readily with my pen than with my tongue. Let me try to compose myself and proceed with my narrative. I had just arrived at the steward's office this morning when Mr. Pedgift the elder followed me to the great house to see Mr. Armadale by special appointment. It is needless to say that I at once suspended any little business there was to do, feeling that your interests might possibly be concerned. It is also most gratifying to add that this time circumstances favoured me. I was able to stand under the open window and to hear the whole interview. Mr. Armadale explained himself at once in the plainest terms. He gave orders that the person who had been hired to watch you should be instantly dismissed. On being asked to explain this sudden change of purpose, he did not conceal that it was owing to the effect produced on his mind by what had passed between Mr. Midwinter and himself on the previous day. Mr. Midwinter's language, cruelly unjust as it was, had nevertheless convinced him that no necessity whatever could excuse any proceeding so essentially base in itself as the employment of a spy, and on that conviction he was now determined to act. But for your own positive directions to me to conceal nothing that passes here in which your name is concerned, I should really be ashamed to report what Mr. Pedgift said on his side. He has behaved kindly to me, I know, but if he was my own brother I could never forgive him the tone in which he spoke of you, and the obstinacy with which he tried to make Mr. Armadale change his mind. He began by attacking Mr. Midwinter. He declared that Mr. Midwinter's opinion was the very worst opinion that could be taken, for it was quite plain that you, dear madam, had twisted him round your finger. Producing no effect by this coarse suggestion, which nobody who knows you could for a moment believe, Mr. Pedgift next referred to Miss Milroy, and asked Mr. Armadale if he had given up all idea of protecting her. What this meant I cannot imagine. I can only report it for your private consideration. Mr. Armadale briefly answered that he had his own plan for protecting Miss Milroy, and that the circumstances were altered in that quarter, or words to a similar effect. Still Mr. Pedgift persisted. He went on, I blush to mention, from bad to worse. He tried to persuade Mr. Armadale next to bring an action at law against one or other of the persons who had been most strongly condemning his conduct in the neighbourhood, for the purpose, I really hardly know how to write it, of getting you into the witness box. And worse yet, when Mr. Armadale still said no, Mr. Pedgift, after having, as I suspected by the sound of his voice, been on the point of leaving the room, artfully came back and proposed sending for a detective officer from London, simply to look at you. "The whole of this mystery about Miss Gwilt's true character," he said, "may turn on a question of identity. It won't cost much to have a man down from London, and it's worth trying whether her face is or is not known at headquarters to the police." I again and again assure you, dearest lady, that I only repeat those abominable words from a sense of duty toward yourself. I declare I shook from head to foot when I heard them. To resume, for there is more to tell you. Mr. Armadale, to his credit, I don't deny it, though I don't like him, still said no. He appeared to be getting irritated under Mr. Pedgift's persistence, and he spoke in a somewhat hasty way. "You persuaded me on the last occasion when we talked about this," he said, "to do something that I have been since heartily ashamed of. You won't succeed in persuading me, Mr. Pedgift, a second time." Those were his words. Mr. Pedgift took him up short. Mr. Pedgift seemed to be nettled on his side. "If that is the light in which you see my advice, sir," he said, "the less you have of it for the future, the better. Your character and position are publicly involved in this matter between yourself and Miss Gwilt, and you persist, at a most critical moment, in taking a course of your own, which I believe will end badly. After what I have already said and done in this very serious case, I can't consent to go on with it with both my hands tied.